following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. The Jewish high holidays are over, so I'm back. And this week we're talking about resilience with a wonderful guest, Dr. Kate Lund, author of Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting. Now, we're going to get into resilience in general terms, but I want to talk about one of the first things Kate says in her book. It's about what resilience is not. Resilience is not just pushing through hardship. The concept of stepping away in parenting, that is, taking small breaks, having something in your life that isn't being a parent, things like that, all in the goal of helping you be a better parent, is a mindset that everyone can use, even if you don't have kids. Unfortunately, really understanding what Kate's talking about involves setting the table, delving into a concept that unfortunately many people are sick of hearing about, and that concept is boundaries. I've been really surprised to see a lot of resentment of boundaries out there by people who call it boundary culture and things like that. And based on what I've been reading, they don't understand boundaries. You know, properly set, communicated boundaries are good for everyone involved, not just the boundary center. Now, if you've been raised by neglectful, narcissistic, or addict parents, and obviously this isn't a complete list, but if you've been raised by people who didn't teach you to understand boundaries, boundaries can feel like abandonment or punishment instead of what they are, protecting the bonds of a relationship. It's really hard to understand boundaries if you weren't raised with them. I get that. I wasn't. Boundaries aren't traps. They're not tricks. They're not loyalty tests. They're just what every individual has the right to do. Set guidelines that can be flexible, because they're not limits, they're boundaries, about what you will accept doing and saying, right? They keep relationships on an even keel, and I'll get to why in a bit. Now, parenting, the focus of Kate's book, is a unique challenge because boundaries are taught. We're not born with an understanding of them. And like I said, parents are the primary source of teaching boundaries. So you've got these little people who you love, but teaching boundaries can be a very trying process for parents. And if you've been raised with no boundaries, it can be even harder. And you know, we've all heard the stories. Millions of parents have had to deal with the incessant, ha, 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 that tickles. During the Tickle Me Elmo phase, people watching go, blah, 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 right? Yeah. Then there was the Frozen song, the Barney theme, that favorite Skibbity toilet video that your kids can't get enough with, and you're sick of hearing about it, right? You're sick of hearing it. Yeah. Single parent families in small spaces have an especially tough time stepping away from this stuff because, well, it's a, small place. There's nowhere to escape to. But you can, for instance, ask your kids to turn down the volume or put on headphones. I feel you. I love my K-pop Demon Hunters, okay? It's a really good Netflix movie. But the craze has gotten to the point, I can only hear Soda Pop so many times in a row. I don't know why that particular song is the one that gets to me, but it is. And again, I love K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, a lot of us are afraid to set boundaries because we're afraid of the reactions we get to them. We're afraid of being called mean or judgmental or some other nasty name or negative consequence. And yeah, boundary busters will do that. This is one of the hardest, the hands down hardest part of trauma therapy for me. And there were a lot of hard parts. But the hardest part was definitely being ping-ponged between a therapist who rightly stressed the importance of boundaries and the negative reactions of people around me who insisted that the therapist didn't know what she was talking about when I tried to set those boundaries. And what ended up happening is the process that was supposed to help me manage my PTSD symptoms was making me feel like I was going even more bad crazy. This is the core of why I decided to devote my focus to people's environments day to day, not the therapy process, which is why I am not a therapist. I say it every single show. There are a lot of great, well-trained therapists out there doing phenomenal work. There aren't as many people like me going, how does that translate into your day-to-day life? How do you navigate that? I am certain I spent much longer in very expensive trauma therapy than I would have needed to if I'd had a better day-to-day series of support systems. I'm working on that till this day. And social media has made boundaries even more confusing. Things are so blurred now. Look at the latest, J.K. Rowling, Emma Watson news, because Emma Watson worked on a movie based on a book J.K. Rowling made when she was a child. She's asked about J.K. Rowling's views on trans people. That's not fair. It's not. And, things like dumping private conversations into the public view, stuff like that has become normalized. And sometimes, if it's a politician caught lying, okay, fair. But most of the time, it is actually a gross violation of boundaries. There's another way to keep people accountable. Someone did that to me recently. And I'll tell you, it feels like a violation. It's embarrassing. Especially when someone you thought was a friend did that. I'll admit it's embarrassing. I'll also admit that going back and reading it, I said some pretty funny stuff in that fight. My favorite line might be, you run people over, then you want to be complimented on the tread pattern. Like Taylor Swift's allowed to steal that, right? Like, I think that's a pretty good line. It's a pretty good description of a chronic boundary buster. You run people over, then you want to be complimented on the tread pattern. Yeah. If I was under less stress, would I have been nicer in describing the person's chronic boundary violations? Maybe. It's still true. And that level of stress, that really matters. The fight was about people not respecting the impact of their behavior on the people around them. If someone doesn't respect the fact that out of control stress levels mean that a given person is not going to be at their best, if you got somebody like that in your life, consider stepping away from those people, either temporarily or possibly permanently. This is what I talk about when I say top 10 phrase. Other people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. Now, real talk. Nobody likes to be told no. Nobody likes to be told stop. But resilient people don't feel intense, burning hurt, rejection, shame, or rage when told to stop. And feeling those intense feelings doesn't mean you ignore or worse, retaliate against the no or the stop. The core of this concept is simple. If you're doing something that bothers someone and they tell you, and you don't stop doing it now that you know this thing bothers the person, it's reasonable to expect that after enough time, that person may not want to be around you anymore because you're doing something that bothers them and you won't stop. That's not what happens in this world though, right? You look at the tech sector, and managers subject the people they supervise, not all managers, some, but Elon Musk and other tech bros, they openly brag about subjecting employees to intense stress and then expecting the best from those employees on an ongoing basis. And this is just counter to science. The judgments on parenting are just as bad in some places. The idea that women are just completely fulfilled only being wives and mothers and spending all day hearing skibbity toilet and ha ha ha, that tickles, right? That's been disproven again and again. And yet, some portions of society won't let it go, and they keep trying to force women right back there. Stress hormones in our brains are designed to let us act quickly in short bursts. Prolonged, intense stress is bad for us. And being around a screaming kid all day is no less stressful than being around a screaming work colleague all day. People need more than that. People need to be able to set boundaries and step away. Not always permanently. Temporarily. But if you are an adult who won't accept someone stepping away temporarily, you're not giving them any other choice but to consider stepping away permanently. You're not stopping. Boundaries, again, are good for everyone involved. Boundaries do not mean you're being judged because it's about the person setting the boundary, not the person being informed of a boundary. Boundaries are the best way to make sure that in groups of people, no one's going to be totally comfortable because people tend to not like being told no and stop. But the good part, no one is uncomfortable to the point that they break. This is ideal, in part because, the studies on stress show that people with very, very low to no stress have cognitive decline. And they connect that to less socializing because socializing it comes with a certain amount of inherent stress. But having no stress is possibly bad for us because a lack of sufficient challenge in our lives can lead to depression, lethargy, and cognitive decline. So as stressful as socializing can be, we're humans. We're meant to socialize to some degree. And that's a big problem with current, disability pension systems. They're either workfare models that I have heard horror stories about, forcing people into jobs that they must keep, they can't quit, or they'll lose their benefits, that are too stressful, or they discourage people from working through payment clawbacks that actively disincentivize taking on new challenges and developing a sense of worth. Because, hey, it might jeopardize your benefits. We can do better. But you go online and look at content on this subject. Yay, especially aimed at men. The content aimed at men, and I've watched this stuff, and I feel I feel beat up by it. It's constantly confusing resilience, which is the ability to adapt to, bounce back from, and even grow stronger in the face of adversity, stress, trauma, or, significant life events. It's confusing that's resilience, with distress tolerance, which is the ability to manage intense or difficult emotions and situations without resorting to impulsive behaviors or making that bad situation worse. A simple way to think about this difference between distress tolerance and resilience is distress tolerance is the ability to shoulder heavy burdens in those bad moments. Resilience is figuring out how to gradually make those burdens lighter. There's so much content aimed at men that it pressures them through guilt and manipulation to rely too much on distress tolerance. And while they're using things like strength and resiliency, they're not talking about resilience at all, hence the fixation on weakness in this content. A big reason that so many men are so miserable is that they take too much on, buckle under the stress, don't do very much at all to process those emotions or figure out how to make their lives easier and more manageable because they're convinced that easier isn't manly. Watching this content, you get this picture that real men consistently take on too much, exist in a constant state of loneliness and emotional destabilization, are completely overburdened, and solve problems by exploding on people, being bullies, and making demands. The problem with that is that behavior, just people don't want to be around that. And so it deepens someone's isolation and therefore unhappiness. Meanwhile, self-care stuff for women online, it's no better. It's oversimplified to, cosmetic surgery, spa days, getting your hair done, and, retail therapy, otherwise known as compulsive shopping. And yeah, those are socially acceptable breaks from the chaos, but they don't do anything to reduce the amount of chaos you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and they're really available only to the wealthy or people who are chronically in debt. It's not workable on a long-term way. So when we come back, we're going to see an alternative. I'm going to talk to Dr. Kate Lund about her strategies for resilience. Well, at least start to. There's a lot more in her book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, but I'll give you a taste after the break and I'll warn people listening over the break. There's going to be a change in my microphone because I'm using a different system, so the mic is going to sound more condensed. People don't care about that. It's just the people who are audiophiles going, why is that different? Anyway, do you have a story you think would be good for the show? Are you interested in sponsoring the show? Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. Nottherapyshow.com is my website. At Not Therapy Show on socials. Resiliency in parenting and beyond when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kirstner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking resilience. What is it and how do you get it? And I have the guest this week, psychologist, best-selling author, host of the Optimized Mind podcast, TEDx speaker, and author of the upcoming book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting. That is coming out. Well, it's out. It came out on October 6th. Dr. Kate Lund. Kate, thank you for coming on It's Not Therapy.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so the resilience, right? It's one of these mental health terms that means something a little different to everybody. So how do you define resilience?
Yeah, that's such a great question because, historically we're thinking about, bouncing back from a challenge or something along those lines, but it's so much more than that. We really are thinking about resilience as a mindset, a lifestyle, something that we can cultivate in ourselves so that it becomes an internalized part of us through strategies and daily sort of actions that we're taking in an intentional way. And then we have this lifestyle, this mindset in place, so we're able to more easily navigate through the challenges that we're all going to inevitably face day in, day out.
Right. And you say that you have the similar mindset that I do, that perfect, I say in the show, stop trying to be perfect. Perfect is a lie. You say no perfection required. How does this idea that you have to be perfect to be good enough, how does that eat away at resiliency?
Oh my goodness, it certainly does, right? Because perfection doesn't exist. It's a question of becoming optimized within our own unique context. And that's going to look different for all of us. We're all coming from different experiences, we have different skills, we have different passions, all of it. So if we're constantly striving for what we're thinking of as perfect because we're never feeling good enough, that is going to cut away at our resilience. It's going to impact our ability to bounce back when things go off track, when we don't hit our goal the way we'd like to. There's always room to try again from another angle, but we need to understand who we are and understand what our context is
Mhm.
and what it looks like to optimize within that context. And so comparison is another piece of this that can then eat away at our resilience. If we're constantly looking at our best friend or, someone in our life who we feel is ahead of us in some way, that's going to eat away at our resilience. We really want to be optimizing within our own unique context.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about those upward social comparisons out there, right? And yet social media encourages us to do it, right? Everybody puts a branded version of themselves, especially when it comes to business owners, when it comes to parents. They're like, look at how perfect my family is. And I'll sit back and go, yeah, right. But most people don't. Most people take it at face value. So what's something someone can say to themselves? How can we do a little shift here? Because you're right about those goals, right? I
Yeah,
say on the show, healthy goals are based on things you can control. But so many people, especially when it comes to their kids, set goals based on outcomes, and that leads to problems. So how does someone do that differently?
my goodness, such a great question. Yeah, it's so hard because you're exactly right, spot on. I mean, we've got these wonderful, perfect, beautiful images that we're seeing all day, really, on social
Hmm.
media, depending on how much we're on social media. And it's a question of really taking that step back and reminding ourselves that, yeah, this might look perfect in the moment. It's most likely curated in some way, but reminding ourselves that everyone's got challenges. Things are never perfect. So, it's important to remind ourselves of that reality before we go down the road of, oh my goodness, these people have it all together. It
Hmm.
all looks so good, and I don't. So reminding ourselves that, it never, things rarely are as they look on the surface. Um, is a really important first step. And again, coming back to understanding ourselves and understanding what it looks like to do our very best within our own unique context. And also, what does that look like for our kids?
Hmm.
And really being careful, even, within the same family, not to compare our kids because our kids are very different. They're going to be coming with different skill sets, with different passions and all of it. And for us as parents to be understanding those realities about our kids, just because one kid, is going to thrive in a certain high powered academic school, maybe the other one won't. And so where and how can we find the right environment for that child? And so, that concept applies across domains of where our kids are going to be involved, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an important point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that thing you said about not comparing kids, academics, and all that stuff. Um, Tell me if I've got this right. I see a lot of parents who think they have to be perfect, like never make mistakes because they have to set a good example for their kids, right?
Oh
And
wow, yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so what about the idea that making mistakes and modeling for your kids how to make them, isn't that the better example than trying to cover everything up that you get wrong?
100%. That is spot on. I mean, that's what I talk about that in my book. I work with folks on this all the time. As parents, it's vital for us to be as authentic as possible with our kids. And part of that authenticity is in a developmentally appropriate way, sharing the things that have been hard for us, sharing the moments when we've, made a mistake and had to come back from that mistake, sharing with them that it's possible to not hit a goal the first time out of the gate, not get something right, but then come back from another angle and hit it the next time. That whole process is so important for us as parents to be not modeling for our kids, not in a way that's going to bog them down, but in a way that is communicated such that they can understand it and see that, oh, yeah, mom had a challenge,
Mhm.
dad had a challenge, but look, they bounced back, they moved forward, they figured out a way around. Yeah, very, very important. That's vital.
Hmm. Yeah, and then with school's a pressure cooker now with kids. You mentioned academics. It's tough for kids who do really, really well. It's tough for kids who don't do really, really well. And it's almost like home is amplifying that now because of the importance of, I hear so many young people going through that meltdown cycle of, I'm going to fail this test and then I'm going to get a bad grade and then I'm not going to get into the school I want and then I'm going to be poor. And it always ends up, and then I'm going to be poor and on the street because of one test. Now, that comes from somewhere. How do we alter that message so it's one that's more resilient and less catastrophic?
Yeah, because that's exactly the word that was coming into my mind, sort of this catastrophic thinking, catastrophizing what could happen
Hmm.
if we don't do well in this moment. And that's really a reality out there because schools are, as you say, pressure cookers at the moment, particularly the, really kind of academically rigorous schools. And,
Hmm.
it comes back once again to helping your child to understand their context, understand their strengths, their relative challenges, what they're bringing to the table. And within that context, helping them to understand, figure out, feel what it looks like to just give their best, to give it their all on that test. As long as they've studied as hard and as well as they can, the outcome isn't the final measure of the success. I mean, we want to get good grades, we want to be doing the best that we can, but it's a question of doing your best, and eventually you will get there. And the reality is, we're not all going to do well on every test. Really hard concept to explain to our kids, and I live that here day in, day out, and it's a fine line, it's a balance.
Yeah, because you don't want them to go, I tried, meaning no, right? Like, no, you really didn't. And they know it. Everybody
Exactly.
knows it when they really didn't put in the effort. But
Exactly.
but we know psychologically that not trying and not failing is less painful to the brain than trying and failing. And this is a major element of resiliency, getting up and going at it again, exactly what you said, trying and trying and trying. And sometimes recognizing, okay, my approach has to change. Sometimes recognizing, I just really have to put the effort in. How do you suggest people get over that fear of failure that just eats into their resilience?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's true. Fear of failure does eat into our sense of resilience. And I see this, with one of my kids actually as we speak. And it's a question of really sitting down and helping one to understand, okay, I get it. You put in great effort. It didn't go well. Let's take a step back and see what are some shifts that you can make the next time. What are some perhaps different angles on the studying that you can do that maybe fit your learning style a little bit more readily or better, that sort of thing. And sometimes it's just small tweaks. It's also believing in yourself that it's possible to do better the next time, even though the failure has really hurt, has really felt like, kind of a big weight on your shoulders type of thing. And it's really a question of helping whoever it is who's trying to go for that next goal or trying to do better the next time to believe in the possibility on the other side of the challenge. I mean, I can tell you stories from my own childhood about where this happened all the time,
Mhm, mhm.
with tests and in the classroom and all of it. So it's taking those small steps forward when things feel impossible, taking the step anyway.
Well said. Kate Lund, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, psychologist, host of the Optimist Mind podcast. Her new book, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, out as of October 6th. Kate, I want to go to the break. When I come back, I'd like to talk more about that sort of concept you just talked about. I kind of summarized it as learning from the mistake without getting hung up on the mistake. And you say you got some 10-minute actions anyone can fit in to make them more resilient. So can we go to the break, come back, talk about that stuff?
Absolutely.
All right, questions, comments, any feedback at all, Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. Nottherapyshow.com is my website. At nottherapyshow on social media. Talking resilience with Dr. Kate Lund when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I am still not a therapist. I am still talking to Dr. Kate Lund, best-selling author, host of the Optimized Mind podcast, psychologist, TEDx speaker. Her book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, is out now, and we are talking about resilience. Now, Kate, you said something really profound before the break, and I want to pick up on that. You talked about little tweaks, basically. What can we do differently next time instead of just throwing ourselves again and again and again at a setback, throwing good effort after bad. And I find one thing I had to work on a lot, and something I noticed in other people, is getting hung up on the mistake so much, feeling so bad that you messed up that you can't learn from it because you're so stuck in the blame and shame cycle. So that is definitely something that changing I found helped my resiliency. What does the science say about this, and what can people do instead?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, sort of getting stuck in the mistake, getting so mired in the fact that you made a mistake, it didn't go well, it's not going to be possible to do anything different next time. First thing we need to do is we need to modulate our stress response, because sort of our emotional intensity escalates when we're caught in a mistake. We just go up, 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 up. And you can't see my hand here, but we want to have sort of a level foundation that we go into each day with, so that we can manage through and beyond the challenges, the mistakes that we make. And what I always teach folks is a very simple mindfulness technique called the relaxation response, which was a technique designed by a physician back in the 70s, and really powerful technique, super simple, which folks can keep in their back pocket, which modulates that stress response. And what we do is we have folks come up with a word or a phrase that they find soothing in some way, and they breathe, practicing 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes later in the day, such that they start to internalize what that modulated stress response feels like, so they can sort of build that into a baseline over time with practice. And having that in place really helps us to, when a mistake happens, not get mired in it, not get caught in that space of, I'm terrible, I'll never get this will never happen for me, et cetera, right? And so that's a really important initial step. The next thing we like to teach folks to do is to understand that regardless of how bad something feels, how stuck you feel in the mistake or in the not having achieved what you had hoped to achieve, there's always something that went well. Might be hard to pinpoint, might be hard to find, but I always have folks at the end of each day sit down, regardless of what it is, jot down 3 to 5 things that went well on that day. And that really helps to shift the mindset back at least to a neutral spot, maybe even to more of a positive lens, such that it's easier to see kind of the nuggets of what went well, even in a situation that did not feel good in terms of its outcome. And I found that that has really helped some teenagers that I work with to kind of recalibrate on mistakes that they've made on the soccer field, for example, or when a test doesn't go well. It's been extremely effective with one of my kids who struggles academically
Mhm.
and will put in the effort and often doesn't feel good after the test. So these are two really key strategies that I work with many, many people on, and they're quite effective.
Yeah, I mean, that's all really solid science. Oh gosh, so many different ways to go because we do live in a world that I've noticed whenever there's some big news story, especially when someone has passed away, people line up to either judge them like this perfect angelic being, or they take, the 10 worst things they've ever said in their entire life and judge them only by that. And if we're exposed enough to that, our mirror neurons get firing, we take that on, right? That infects us in a way, that all or nothing thinking, that idea that we're either this paragon of the community or we're just flat out evil and there's no in between. And do you have a daily practice, one of these little 10-minute actions that can buffer against that? Because without some backstop on it, it just gets under your skin.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what I would say there is I would go back to the relaxation response because that's really at the core of all of this, right? Having a modulated baseline in terms of where we are when a stressor comes up will really help us to take that step back and assess what we're hearing. What we're seeing on TV will help us to create more of a balanced perspective as opposed to taking on that all or nothing thinking,
Hmm.
which happens when we're stressed out, when
Yes.
our stress response is intensified to a level that we're not able to take that step back. We're stuck in this intensity, and we really don't want to be living there. So, yeah, it's practicing consistently modulating your stress response that's going to help us on that front.
Now, this brings us into the realm of self-care. And self-care has become such a cliche, right? It's both absolutely accurate that if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to have a heightened stress response. If you are at the end of your rope, then it's just going to be harder to deal with the bumps that come along. But self-care has become almost more of a marketing strategy than something we really meaningfully connect to. So, how can you give people, how to get started now tips regarding actual, taking care of yourself on a regular basis instead of the very expensive spa day every day as a cope? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely do. And it's true. This notion of self-care, it's real. I mean, and it's vital for us to be engaging in things that help us to modulate our stress response, to care for ourselves holistically, all of these things. But yeah, not to jump into the latest fad or trend or, super expensive spa day or, newest electronic gadget or whatever. So we can do things that are very simple, very easily accessible. And we want to make sure they fit into our own context. Who are we, right? So I always talk to folks about the power of physical exercise and
Hmm.
movement. And so that, can look different for all of us. For some, they might get a huge benefit from a walk around the block at lunch. Someone else might, need a more intense jog on the treadmill or ride on the exercise bike or what have you. But regardless of the form it takes, movement is absolutely key in helping us to modulate our stress response, be at our physical best. So whatever that looks like for somebody, really, really important. As long as they've, if necessary, have checked with their doctor or what have you.
Right.
Um, so that's huge. Uh, you know, basic things like sleep and nutrition working within their own context. But then beyond that, social connection is so powerful. And sometimes we're moving through life so fast. It's like, oh, we don't have time to call our friend, or we don't have time to grab lunch with somebody on a Saturday or what have you. But taking the time, making the time for those things is really, really powerful. And that's a big piece of how we can care for ourselves. And, doing things that bring us joy each
Hmm.
day, a small thing, maybe throwing on a song that we love, or, sipping a cup of hot tea on the porch or whatever. It can take so many different forms, but really taking a look at yourself and your life and thinking about, what are some of the things that make me feel happy? Where do I find little bits of joy, and plugging those in intentionally, because it's something that we all can skip over very easily because we're moving so fast through our day to day. And finding a way to reconnect with those things is really a vital piece of self-care that we can do, in a very simple, intentional way each day.
Yeah, productivity really is more of a marathon as opposed to a sprint, isn't it? I mean, I see so many people get mired in how many hours they work as opposed to how productive are they being during those hours. And if someone has an anxiety about productivity, I mean, I grew up in a home where my mother never sat down during her waking hours. She was always doing the dishes or cleaning something up or doing something productive. To this day, she's got pain in her body. She doesn't stop. She's got a headache. She doesn't stop. How does somebody break that cycle of, having to do something productive every single minute of their waking day so they can do that important thing like sip tea on the porch?
Yeah, that's really, really a great question. And it's really a question of taking that step back and seeing that the world isn't going to stop if we stop moving
Hmm.
for a moment. And sometimes it's a practice, right? Just taking that first step and being like, having the perspective to wonder, what will it feel like if I do take a half hour to sip tea on the porch, or 15 minutes, or what have you? So it's a process. It's not, we don't have a magic button for any of this, right?
Hmm.
It's sort of trial and error, experimentation. But I promise you that when we take that time for ourselves to slow down, to push the pause button for a moment, that accumulates. The benefits of that become cumulative over time. And suddenly we see that because of that, we can create more time and space for the things that help us to care for ourselves, help us to feel better, and we become more productive. Because you're right, like that constant motion, that constant working 60 hours a week,
Hmm.
are those productive hours? I doubt it, because no one can sustain that, right? And
Hmm.
so I agree. Um, Productivity over time is really an important piece to keep in mind.
Yeah, it felt bad for me when I stopped working, 80-hour days, 6.5 days a week. And it felt bad at first to step back. It was anxiety inducing. But when I started
Mm-hmm.
realizing, I didn't feel like garbage come Wednesday every week, then it became motivating to repeat it. So really, really great advice. Dr. Kate Lung, psychologist, best-selling author, host of the Optimized Mind podcast, TEDx speaker, and most importantly, the author of the new book, Step Away: The Keys to Resilient Parenting. It is in stores right now. If you like this little bit we got from Kate now, check out the book. It's full of this stuff. Kate, thank you so much for coming on It's Not Therapy. Do you have a website or something like that that people can check out more of you and what you do?
I do. Yeah. It's www.katelundspeaks.com.
KateLundSpeaks.com. Kate with a K, Lund, Lund speaks.com. Kate, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, when we come back, we got a few minutes left in the show. I will give you some tips to help you get started on this resilience work that don't involve buying Kate's wonderful book, Step Away. When we come back on It's Not Therapy, questions, comments, any feedback, Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email, at nottherapyshow is socials. See you in a bit. Last little bit on resilience when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kirsner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking resiliency. And again, I'd like to promote Kate Lund's wonderful book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting. There's a lot of really great stuff, way more than we could get to in an interview in this format. One of the things she talks about the book that I want to close on is knowing when to step away, but also when to step in or step forward, and how essential this is for fostering independence and resilience, not just in yourself, but in the people in your life. And this is obviously more art than science. It is a learned skill, but it also involves a lot of communication. It starts by the conversations with the people around you. Trying to solve problems when stress levels and tensions are high is obviously way more difficult than setting aside time to talk on a regular basis when things are calmer. If you carve out that time, if you carve out rest time, if you carve out recovery time, if you carve out conversation time, instead of just doing it as needed, it makes things better than I can possibly describe to you. And a lot of people are going to start off this process feeling like burdens or feeling like they're bothering people by doing this. And you know what? People might seem irritated at first because it's like, oh, woo-woo and self-help and all that nonsense. But if you try it, as soon as you see the difference, you'll get it. We did this at work, right? There's regular meetings. Why? So everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what the priorities are going forward. Well-managed workplaces do that. They don't, wait for there to be a crisis to dispense information and make sure everybody's on the same page. But we don't do that. We aren't as mindful with friendships. And that's just weird. What's not weird is I'm out of time. So Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. Not Therapy Show is my online social media handle. Your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next time.